The air in the courtroom was a suffocating blend of cheap air freshener and palpable despair. For Sarah Miller, it felt like drowning. Across the aisle, her ex-husband, Mark, sat with a look of practiced solemnity, his hand resting possessively on the arm of a woman half his age. Chloe, the woman who had dismantled her family. Mark had brought his mistress to court, a calculated power play in their brutal custody battle. He was painting a picture of a new, stable family, while Sarah was just the broken, discarded part. But as the judge's gaze swept over them, a quiet intensity in her eyes, Sarah felt a flicker of something other than fear. It was the last, desperate ember of hope, waiting for a single breath of truth to ignite. The silence in the house was the first thing that had truly felt like her own. It had been a year since the divorce, a year since Mark's things were packed into boxes, and his presence, a heavy, oppressive blanket, had finally been lifted from their suburban home in Maple Creek. In its place, a fragile peace had settled. It was a quiet life, punctuated by the joyful chaos of her 6-year-old daughter Lily, a whirlwind of bright pink dresses and glitter glue. Sarah had spent the last 12 months meticulously rebuilding their world. She'd repainted the living room a warm, buttery yellow, replacing the sterile beige Mark had insisted on. She'd planted a garden, a riot of unruly wildflowers that defied the perfect manicured lawns of their neighbors. She and Lily had their rituals. Pancake Saturdays, Friday night movie marathons buried under a mountain of blankets, and long walks in the nearby woods where Lily would collect treasures, smooth stones, fallen leaves, and the occasional iridescent beetle. For the first time in a decade, Sarah felt like she could breathe. Her marriage to Mark had been a slow erosion of self. He wasn't overtly cruel, not in a way that left visible bruises. His weapon was control, wielded with the precision of a surgeon. It was in the way he'd helpfully manage their finances until she had no idea where their money went. It was in the subtle dismissal of her opinions, the gentle steering of her career choices away from anything that might make her too independent. He was the successful one, the charismatic financial advisor everyone admired. She was just his wife, a supporting role in the grand production of his life. The discovery of the affair had been both a cataclysm and a liberation. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet, sickening realization born from a credit card statement left on the counter, a charge for a boutique hotel in the city on a night he was supposedly on a business trip. When she'd confronted him, he hadn't even bothered to deny it. He'd looked at her with a chilling sort of pity, as if she were a piece of outdated technology he was finally upgrading. The upgrade was Chloe Jennings, a 25-year-old intern from his office with wide, ambitious eyes and a complete lack of compunction. The divorce had been swift. Mark, ever conscious of his public image, wanted it clean. He was generous with the settlement, giving her the house and enough money to live comfortably. For Lily's sake, he'd said, a phrase that dripped with false magnanimity. He knew it made him look good, the benevolent ex-husband ensuring his child's stability. He took an apartment in the city, and for a while, the arrangement worked. He saw Lily every other weekend, picking her up in his gleaming new Tesla, a symbol of his untethered success. But the peace was an illusion. The first tremor came in the form of a registered letter, a thick cream-colored envelope that felt heavy with dread in her hands. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. The legal jargon swam before her eyes, but the words that leaped out were brutally clear. Petition for modification of custodial arrangement. Full physical custody. The world tilted on its axis. He wanted to take Lily. Her first call was to Eleanor Vance, the lawyer who had handled her divorce. Eleanor was a woman who seemed to be forged from steel and caffeine, her voice a no-nonsense rasp over the phone. "He has no grounds, Sarah," Eleanor had said, her tone attempting to soothe the raw panic in Sarah's voice. "The court's default is to maintain the status quo unless there's a significant change in circumstances. Has anything changed? Are you in any trouble?" "No, of course not," Sarah had stammered, pacing her sun-drenched kitchen, which suddenly felt like a cage. "My life is quiet. It's all about Lily." What's his stated reason? The petition must allege something. Sarah's eyes scanned the document again. He claims my unstable emotional state and lack of a structured environment are detrimental to our daughter's well-being. He says he and his new partner can provide a more wholesome and financially secure home. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped Eleanor's lips. His partner? The intern? He's going to bring his mistress into a custody hearing? That's bold, I'll give him that. Arrogant, but bold. The arrogance was Mark's signature. He believed his own narrative so completely that he couldn't fathom anyone else questioning it. He was the hero, the provider, the one who knew best. In his mind, this wasn't a cruel act. It was a rescue mission. He was saving Lily from her mother's mediocrity. That night, as she tucked Lily into bed, the weight of the petition pressed down on her chest. Lily's room was a sanctuary of childhood, the walls covered in her own crayon drawings, a stuffed unicorn named Sparklehoof holding pride of place on her pillow. "Mummy, why are your eyes wet?" Lily asked, her small hand reaching up to touch Sarah's cheek. Sarah forced a smile, her heart splintering. "Just a little tired, sweet pea. Grown-up stuff." "Is it because of Daddy?" The question was so direct, so innocent, Sarah didn't know how to answer it. How could she explain that the man who was supposed to love them both was trying to tear their world apart, that he saw their quiet, happy life as something broken that needed fixing? "Daddy and I just disagree on some things sometimes," she said, the understatement of the century. "But we both love you more than anything in the whole wide world. Never, ever forget that." "I know," Lily said, snuggling deeper into her covers. "Can you tell me the story about the brave knight again?" As Sarah recounted the familiar tale of a knight who protects her kingdom from a fearsome dragon, she felt a shift inside her. The fear was still there, a cold, coiling serpent in her gut. But beneath it, a different emotion was taking root, a fierce, primal anger. Mark had underestimated her. He had always seen her as soft, pliable, an accessory to his life. He had forgotten that a mother's love wasn't just soft blankets and bedtime stories. It was also a sword and a shield. He wanted a war. He was about to get one. He was not taking her daughter. The preliminary hearing was held in a small, suffocating room at the county courthouse. The beige walls seemed to absorb all the hope from anyone who entered, leaving only the sterile scent of bureaucracy and quiet desperation. Sarah sat beside Eleanor Vance, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. She had chosen her outfit with the care of a soldier preparing for battle. A simple navy blue dress, sensible low heels, and her hair pulled back in a neat professional bun. She needed to look stable, calm. Everything Mark's petition accused her of not being. Then he walked in. Mark was the picture of success, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly mortgage payment. He exuded an aura of effortless confidence, the kind that came from a life of things always going his way. And beside him, clinging to his arm, was Chloe Jennings. Seeing her in the flesh, in this context, was a physical blow. Sarah had only ever seen pictures of her, curated, smiling images on social media. In person, she was even younger, prettier and more polished than Sarah had imagined. She wore a cream-colored dress that was both modest and expensive, her blonde hair styled in perfect, glossy waves. She looked like a catalogue model for a life Sarah was no longer a part of. The most galling part was the way they acted. They weren't hiding. They were performing. Mark would lean in and whisper something in Chloe's ear, and she would smile, a bright, dazzling smile that was clearly meant to be seen. They were a team, a united front, and Sarah was the opposition, the obstacle to their perfect, happy future. Eleanor leaned in, her voice a low, steadying murmur in Sarah's ear. Don't look at them. Look at the judge. They don't matter. He's the only one who matters. The judge was a man in his late 50s, Judge Albright, with tired eyes and a weary expression that suggested he'd seen this exact drama play out 1,000 times before. He shuffled through the paperwork, his face unreadable. Mark's lawyer, a slick, silver-haired man named Peterson, spoke first. His voice was smooth as silk, weaving a narrative of concern and paternal love. He spoke of Mark's thriving career, his financial stability, and his deep desire to provide his daughter with every possible advantage. Mr. Miller has recently entered into a stable, long-term partnership with Ms. Chloe Jennings, Peterson said, gesturing towards Chloe, who offered the judge a small, demure smile. Together, they can offer Lily a two-parent household, a structured environment that, regrettably, her mother is currently unable to provide. Eleanor stood up, her presence sharp and commanding. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is making unsubstantiated claims about my client's fitness as a parent. The only thing that has changed since the divorce decree is that Mr. Miller now wishes to install his former mistress in the family home." The word mistress hung in the air. Chloe's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Mark shot a venomous glare across the aisle at Sarah, who kept her eyes fixed firmly on the judge. Peterson countered smoothly. "Mr. Miller and Ms. Jennings are in a committed, loving relationship. We are prepared to show that Ms. Miller's own lifestyle has become erratic, that her emotional state following the divorce has created an environment of instability for the child." It was a lie, a complete fabrication, but it was Mark's strategy. Throw enough mud and hope some of it sticks. He would twist her grief into instability, her independence into recklessness. "Your Honor," Eleanor said, her voice cutting through Peterson's rhetoric, "Mrs. Miller has been the primary caregiver for Lily since birth. She has maintained the family home, enrolled Lily in school, and managed all of her day-to-day needs. The only thing erratic here is Mr. Miller's sudden, self-serving desire to upend his daughter's life, conveniently after his new partner has moved in with him." Judge Albright held up a hand, silencing both lawyers. He looked from Mark to Sarah, his gaze lingering for a moment. "This is a preliminary hearing. We are not going to try the entire case today. I am setting a date for a full custody hearing in 6 weeks. In the interim, the current custody arrangement will remain in place." He paused, then directed his next words to Mark. "Mr. Miller, I will caution you. Bringing your new partner into these proceedings at such an early stage can be perceived in several ways. Be mindful of that." It was a small victory, a tiny crack in Mark's armor of arrogance. But as they filed out of the room, Mark made sure to deliver a parting shot. He caught Sarah's eye in the hallway, his expression a mask of false sympathy. "Sarah, this doesn't have to be ugly," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Chloe stood a few feet away, pretending to be engrossed in her phone. "Just agree to the new arrangement. It's what's best for Lily. Don't drag her through a messy fight you can't win." The condescension in his tone, the absolute certainty of his victory, was like a spark to dry tinder. "The only thing that's best for Lily is to be with her mother in her own home," Sarah retorted, her voice shaking slightly but firm. "And the only one making this messy is you, Mark. You brought her here." She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked away, Eleanor at her side. Her heart was pounding, a frantic drum against her ribs. She had survived the first skirmish, but the war was just beginning. "He's trying to intimidate you," Eleanor said as they walked down the courthouse steps into the jarringly bright afternoon sun. "He thinks you'll crumble. He's counting on it." "I won't," Sarah said, the words feeling more like a promise to herself than a statement to her lawyer. "Good," Eleanor replied, unlocking her car, "because he just made his first mistake. The judge didn't like that little show. It was arrogant, and if there's one thing judges hate more than lying, it's arrogance. Now, we have 6 weeks to prove he's not just arrogant, but that he's a liar with a hidden agenda." As Sarah drove home, the image of Chloe's perfect smile and Mark's possessive hand on her arm was burned into her mind. It wasn't just about stability or a two-parent home. It was about erasure. Mark wanted to erase Sarah from the picture, to replace her with a newer, more compliant model and rewrite their family history with himself as the hero. He wasn't just fighting for custody, he was fighting for control of the narrative. And Sarah knew with a chilling certainty that she had to find a way to expose the truth before he buried her under his lies. The 6 weeks leading up to the custody hearing stretched before Sarah like a barren desert. The days were a blur of anxious activity, while the nights were long and sleepless, filled with the ghosts of 1,000 worst-case scenarios. Her home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a fishbowl. She imagined Mark's lawyers picking apart every detail of her life, twisting every late-night glass of wine with her best friend, Jessica, into a sign of alcoholism. Every moment of tearful frustration into proof of her emotional instability. Eleanor Vance, however, was a beacon of focused energy. "He's built his case on a lie," she'd stated during their first strategy session in her cluttered, book-lined office. "He claims this is about Lily's well-being. Our job is to find out what it's really about. Men like Mark don't do things without a reason that benefits them directly." They started with the finances. Mark had provided his financial disclosures, a thick stack of papers detailing his income, assets, and investments. On the surface, it was a picture of overwhelming success. His salary as a senior advisor at a prestigious firm was astronomical. He had a robust stock portfolio and a healthy retirement fund. It was all designed to scream stability to the court. "He's making a big show of his wealth," Eleanor mused, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on a page detailing his investment accounts. "He wants to contrast it with your situation, but it feels too perfect, too polished." Eleanor hired a forensic accountant, a quiet, meticulous man named Mr. Davies, who specialized in sniffing out financial deceptions in messy divorces. While he began his deep dive into Mark's empire of numbers, Sarah focused on what she could control, building a fortress of evidence around her own fitness as a mother. She asked for letters of recommendation from Lily's teachers, her pediatrician, and the parents of Lily's friends. The response was overwhelming. People who had seen her day in and day out, at school drop-offs, soccer practices, and birthday parties, painted a picture of a devoted, attentive, and loving mother. Each letter was a small stone in the wall she was building against Mark's assault. Her best friend, Jessica, was her rock. A fiercely loyal single mom herself, Jessica arrived most evenings with takeout and a bottle of wine, ready to listen, rage, or distract as needed. "He's a classic narcissist, Sarah," Jessica said one night as they sat at the kitchen table long after Lily was asleep. "This isn't about Lily. This is about winning. He can't stand that you're happy without him. That you're building a life where he's not the center of the universe. He has to destroy it to prove he still has power over you." Jessica's words resonated with a painful truth, but Eleanor's voice echoed in her head. Find out what it's really about. A week later, a small crack in Mark's story appeared. Sarah was sorting through old boxes in the attic, looking for photos of her and Lily to show the court, when she came across a file of documents from early in their marriage. It contained the original paperwork for a trust fund Mark's wealthy grandmother had set up for him. Sarah remembered him being dismissive of it at the time, claiming it was tied up in so much red tape it was hardly worth thinking about. She scanned the aged pages. Most of it was dense legalese, but one clause caught her eye. It stipulated that the principal of the trust, a substantial 7-figure sum, could only be accessed before the age of 40 under specific circumstances. One of them was for the establishment and maintenance of a primary family residence for the benefit of his legal dependents. Mark was turning 40 in 8 months. Her heart began to pound. She immediately called Eleanor. "I think I've found something," she said, her voice breathless. She read the clause aloud. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, and then Eleanor let out a low whistle. Well, 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 that's interesting. He never disclosed this trust in the divorce. He claimed it was inaccessible. He always said it was locked up until he was older, Sarah explained. And now he's trying to establish a primary family residence with Lily as the dependent, Eleanor finished, the pieces clicking into place. If he gets full custody, he can argue that his new apartment, or a new house he plans to buy with Chloe, is the primary family residence. He could petition the trustees to release the funds. The audacity of it was staggering. This wasn't about providing a better life for Lily, it was about getting his hands on a multi-million-dollar trust fund. Lily wasn't a daughter to be cherished, she was a key to unlock a vault. The thought made Sarah feel sick. The revelation galvanized their efforts. Mr. Davies, the forensic accountant, now knew what to look for. He started digging into Mark's recent spending habits. What he found was even more disturbing. "Your ex-husband is living well beyond his means," Mr. Davies reported a few days later, his voice grim over the phone. "His salary is high, yes, but his expenditures are higher. The new car, the downtown apartment, the lavish gifts for Ms. Jennings. He's racking up significant debt. He's been liquidating parts of his stock portfolio to cover the shortfall, but that's not a sustainable strategy. He needs a massive infusion of cash, and he needs it soon." The picture was becoming clearer, and it was uglier than Sarah could have imagined. Mark wasn't the successful provider he pretended to be. He was a man in a financial death spiral, desperately trying to maintain an illusion of wealth, and he was willing to use his own daughter as collateral. The knowledge was both terrifying and empowering. The whispers of doubt had become a roar of certainty. This was no longer just a personal battle. It was about exposing a calculated, cynical fraud. One afternoon, as Sarah was picking Lily up from school, she saw them. Mark and Chloe were parked across the street watching. They weren't trying to be subtle. When Mark saw that Sarah had spotted them, he gave a small, smug wave, as if to say, "I'm always here. I'm always watching." Instead of feeling intimidated, Sarah felt a cold fury settle over her. She took Lily's hand, squeezed it tight, and smiled down at her daughter as if nothing was wrong. She would not let him see her fear. She would not let him think for 1 second that he was winning. He thought he was in control, that he was the master puppeteer pulling all the strings. But he didn't know that she had found the one string that could bring his entire elaborate stage crashing down around him. As the hearing date loomed closer, Mark intensified his campaign of psychological warfare. He was banking on Sarah's history of being non-confrontational, the decade she had spent placating his moods and deferring to his judgment. He expected her to unravel under the pressure. He began with small, insidious attacks. Mutual friends would call Sarah, reporting that Mark had expressed deep concern for her well-being. He was spinning a tale of a fragile ex-wife who was barely coping, a woman lost without his guidance. He'd mentioned to the other parents at the soccer field how worried he was that Lily's home life was unstructured, a carefully chosen word designed to sound reasonable and caring. Then came the direct provocations. He would schedule his weekend pickups for Lily at odd times, forcing Sarah to change her plans at the last minute, then document her frustration as proof of her inflexibility. He sent emails dripping with false concern, suggesting therapists for her and parenting classes she should attend, all of which he was no doubt forwarding to his lawyer, Peterson. Each move was a calculated poke, designed to elicit an emotional reaction he could use against her. But something in Sarah had hardened. The woman Mark thought he knew, the one who would have dissolved into tears and self-doubt, was gone. In her place was a mother fighting for her child, and that transformation had forged a spine of steel within her. With Eleanor's guidance, she responded to every provocation with unnerving calm. She replied to his emails with brief, polite, and non-committal sentences. She documented every instance of his manipulative behavior, creating a timeline that starkly contradicted the concerned father persona he was trying to sell. The shift in Sarah was not lost on Mark. His frustration began to show in small, almost imperceptible ways. During one tense exchange in her driveway, when he was dropping Lily off, his mask of calm slipped. "You know you're not going to win this, Sarah," he'd hissed, his voice low so Lily couldn't hear. "You're being selfish. You're thinking about what you want, not what's best for our daughter." "What's best for Lily is not being used as a pawn in your financial schemes, Mark," she'd replied coolly, her heart hammering but her voice steady. The shock on his face was instantaneous. It was a flicker of panic in his eyes, quickly masked by anger. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The trust fund, Mark. Grandma Eleanor's trust. I know you need custody to get your hands on it." He stared at her, his jaw tight. For the first time in their entire relationship, he seemed to be at a loss for words. He had always been 10 steps ahead, manipulating the narrative, controlling the flow of information. Her knowing about the trust was a variable he hadn't accounted for. He had underestimated her completely. "You're delusional," he finally spat out, before getting back in his car and speeding away. But Sarah had seen it, the crack in his perfect facade. Meanwhile, Eleanor was preparing their counter-offensive. "We have the motive, the trust fund. We have the means, his mounting debt. Now we need to dismantle his central argument that he and Chloe can provide a better home." Eleanor decided it was time to put Chloe Jennings under the microscope. She hired a private investigator, a discreet woman who began looking into Chloe's background. What she found wasn't scandalous, but it was illuminating. Chloe came from a working-class family and had put herself through college on scholarships and loans. She was ambitious, driven, and according to a former roommate the investigator spoke to, completely obsessed with the lifestyle of the ultra-wealthy. "She's not just in love with your ex-husband," Eleanor summarized. "She's in love with his wallet, or more accurately, the wallet he's pretending to have. She's hitched her wagon to what she thinks is a rising star. She's as much a part of the illusion as he is." This information sparked an idea for Sarah. A risky one. One Saturday, when she knew Mark was out of town on a supposed business trip, she took a drive to his upscale apartment building in the city. She waited in her car for hours, her stomach in knots. Finally, just after 3 p.m., Chloe emerged from the building, dressed for a day of shopping. Sarah got out of her car, her heart pounding. "Chloe!" Chloe turned, her eyes widening in surprise and then narrowing with suspicion. "Sarah, what are you doing here? Are you following me?" "I just want to talk to you for a minute," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice even. "We have nothing to talk about," Chloe said, turning to walk away. "Is he worth it?" Sarah called out, her voice stronger than she expected. "Is Mark worth destroying a little girl's life?" Chloe stopped. She turned back slowly, her expression a mixture of anger and defensiveness. "Mark is a good man. He's a wonderful father who just wants what's best for his daughter." She was reciting a script, words that had clearly been fed to her. "Does he?" Sarah pressed, taking a step closer. "Or does he just want what's best for his bank account? Do you know about the trust fund he's trying to access, the one that requires him to have full custody of Lily?" Chloe's face paled slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Sarah said, her voice softening with something that sounded almost like pity. "He's using you, Chloe, just like he's using Lily. He's built this fantasy of a perfect, wealthy life, but it's a house of cards. I've seen the financials. I know he's drowning in debt. Did you know that? When the money from that trust doesn't come through, and it won't, what do you think is going to happen to you? To this life he's promised you?" Chloe stared at her, her carefully constructed composure beginning to crumble. For a moment, Sarah saw past the ambitious intern to the young woman beneath, a woman who had perhaps been blinded by the promise of a fairy tale. "You should leave," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. Just think about it, Sarah said. Think about what kind of man would use his own child as a financial tool. Is that really the man you want to build a life with? Sarah walked back to her car, leaving Chloe standing on the sidewalk, a solitary, shaken figure against the cold glass and steel of the city. She didn't know if she had gotten through to her, but she had planted a seed of doubt. And in a facade built on lies, a single seed of doubt could be enough to make the whole thing fall apart. The power was shifting, and for the first time, Sarah felt she wasn't just playing defense. She was on the attack. The day of the final hearing arrived, cloaked in a grey, oppressive drizzle that mirrored the cold dread in Sarah's stomach. The courtroom was larger this time, more formal, the dark wood of the judge's bench and witness stand gleaming under the fluorescent lights. It felt like a stage set for an execution. Sarah sat beside Eleanor, a file of their carefully gathered evidence on the table between them like a shield. Across the aisle, Mark sat with Peterson, his lawyer. Chloe was seated in the front row of the gallery, directly behind him. She was dressed in a conservative grey suit, her face a pale, tense mask. She refused to meet Sarah's gaze. The new judge, Judge Amelia Thompson, was a woman in her 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a reputation for being both tough and fair. She had read every document, every deposition, and her expression was one of focused intensity. The morning was a grueling procession of legal maneuvering. Peterson called his witnesses first, painting a picture of Mark as a pillar of stability and Sarah as a flighty, emotional wreck. He twisted her grief into depression, her newfound independence into recklessness. He brought up the time Sarah had been 5 minutes late for a school pickup, the time Lily had scraped her knee at the park under her watch. It was a death by 1,000 cuts, each one designed to portray her as an unfit mother. Through it all, Sarah remained composed, following Eleanor's instructions to keep her expression neutral, her focus on the judge. When it was Eleanor's turn to cross-examine Mark's witnesses, she expertly dismantled their testimony, revealing their biases and the clear influence of Mark's narrative. Finally, it was Mark's turn to take the stand. He was the star of his own show, his performance flawless. He spoke of his deep, abiding love for Lily, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. He talked about his desire to give her a life of opportunity and security. "My daughter deserves a stable, two-parent home," he said, looking earnestly at Judge Thompson. "My partner, Chloe, is a wonderful woman. She adores Lily. She's ready to be a second parent to her, to provide the kind of support and structure that, unfortunately, Sarah is no longer capable of providing." When Eleanor began her cross-examination, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Mr. Miller," she began, her voice crisp, "you claim this is about your daughter's well-being. Is that correct?" "Absolutely," Mark said, his confidence unwavering. "It has nothing to do with your personal finances?" "Of course not," he scoffed. "That's an insulting accusation." Eleanor walked slowly towards the witness stand. "Isn't it true, Mr. Miller, that your late grandmother established a significant trust fund for you?" Peterson was on his feet instantly. "Objection! Relevance!" "Your Honor," Eleanor countered smoothly, "it is highly relevant. It speaks directly to the petitioner's motive for seeking this sudden and drastic change in custody." "I'll allow it," Judge Thompson said, her eyes fixed on Mark. "Answer the question, Mr. Miller." Mark's composure flickered. "Yes, there is a trust." "And isn't it true," Eleanor continued, "that you are unable to access the principal of that trust, a sum of over $2 million, until you are 40, unless it is for the purpose of maintaining a primary family residence for your legal dependents?" Mark's face was turning a blotchy red. "That's a misrepresentation of the terms." "Is it?" Eleanor pressed, holding up a copy of the trust document. "And isn't it also true that you are currently in significant personal debt, having leveraged your assets to maintain a lifestyle you cannot afford?" "Objection!" Peterson shouted. "Sustained," the judge said. "Move on, Ms. Vance, you've made your point." Eleanor had planted the seed of doubt with the judge. Now it was time to dismantle the other half of Mark's case. the perfect ready-made family he was offering with Chloe. Peterson called Chloe to the stand. She walked gracefully, if stiffly, and sat down, folding her hands in her lap. She answered Peterson's questions in a soft, rehearsed voice, speaking of her affection for Lily and her desire to help create a nurturing home. She was the image of a perfect stepmother in waiting. When it was Eleanor's turn, she asked only a few gentle questions about Chloe's job and her relationship with Mark. Then she said, "I have no further questions, Your Honor." Peterson looked surprised but pleased, assuming they had no way to challenge his client's pristine image. But then Judge Thompson leaned forward, her gaze fixed on the young woman in the witness box. The room fell silent. "Ms. Jennings," the judge said, her voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room, "I have just one question for you." Chloe looked up, a deer in the headlights. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Thompson's eyes were piercing, cutting through the layers of rehearsal and deception. "What is the name of Lily's teddy bear?" The silence that followed was absolute. It was a silence so profound that Sarah could hear the frantic beating of her own heart. It was such a simple question, a detail so small, so intimate, that it couldn't be faked. Anyone who had spent more than a few hours with Lily, anyone who had tucked her into bed or comforted her after a nightmare, would know the answer. Chloe's perfectly made-up face went blank. Her eyes darted towards Mark, a desperate, silent plea for help. Mark's face was a thundercloud of fury and panic. He could do nothing. I'm not sure I recall," Chloe stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "She has so many toys." "This is her special one," Judge Thompson pressed gently. "The one she can't sleep without, the one she's had since she was a baby." Chloe's composure shattered. Her eyes filled with tears of humiliation. She looked from the judge to Mark and then down at her hands. The lie was exposed, not by a lawyer's trickery or a complex document, but by a simple, profound truth. She didn't know this child. She was a stranger. "The bear's name," Sarah heard herself whisper, the words a prayer of relief, "is Barnaby." Judge Thompson's gaze shifted from the crumbling witness to Mark, and her expression was one of utter contempt. In that moment, everyone in the courtroom knew it was over. The entire elaborate, cruel charade had been destroyed by one simple question. The judge's gavel came down with a crack that echoed the shattering of Mark's world. The verdict was swift, brutal, and utterly decisive. "Petition for modification of custody is denied," Judge Thompson announced, her voice ringing with authority. She didn't stop there. She looked directly at Mark, her eyes cold with fury. "Mr. Miller, this court finds your petition to be frivolous, manipulative, and brought in bad faith. You have attempted to use your own child as a pawn in what appears to be a cynical financial ploy. You have wasted this court's time, and most egregiously, you have subjected your daughter and her mother to immense and unnecessary emotional distress. I am awarding full legal and physical custody to the mother, Mrs. Sarah Miller. Your visitation will be reduced to supervised visits, pending a full psychological evaluation. This court is adjourned." The finality of her words sucked the air from the room. For a moment, no one moved. Sarah sat frozen, the words washing over her in a wave of disbelief and overwhelming relief. Tears she hadn't allowed herself to cry for months began to stream down her face. Eleanor reached over and squeezed her hand, a rare, genuine smile on her face. Across the aisle, the scene was imploding. Mark stood up, his face purple with rage. He turned not to his lawyer, but to Chloe, who was still sitting, ashen-faced, in the witness stand. "You useless idiot!" he snarled, his voice a venomous whisper that was audible in the stunned silence. "One simple thing. You couldn't remember one simple thing." Chloe flinched, as if he had struck her. The illusion of the loving, supportive couple evaporated, revealing the ugly reality beneath, a master and his failing subordinate. Peterson, his face grim, grabbed Mark's arm. "Mark, not here. Let's go." He tried to steer his client towards the exit, but the damage was done. The performance was over, and the audience had seen the monstrous truth behind the curtain. As they moved into the hallway, the fight erupted in full. "This is your fault," Mark raged at Chloe, his voice now echoing in the marble corridor. "I gave you everything. I told you what to study, what to say. You were supposed to be perfect." "You lied to me." Chloe's voice, for the first time, held a note of genuine strength, born of pure fury and humiliation. "You told me this was about giving Lily a better life. You never said anything about a trust fund. You used me." "You wanted to be used," he shot back. "You loved the money, the dinners, the clothes. Don't pretend you were some innocent victim." Sarah and Eleanor walked past them, Sarah deliberately averting her eyes. She didn't want to see this. She felt no triumph in their destruction, only a profound sadness for the wreckage they had caused. She had won, but the victory felt heavy, stained by the ugliness of the battle. Once outside, the cool, damp air felt like the first clean breath she'd taken in months. The city noise, the traffic, the distant sirens, it all sounded like a symphony of freedom. "It's over," she whispered, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. "It's over," Eleanor confirmed. "He won't be bothering you again for a very long time. A psychological evaluation and supervised visits, he'll never subject his ego to that. He'll fade away." Driving home, Sarah felt a strange emptiness. She had been in fight-or-flight mode for so long, fueled by adrenaline and fear, that the sudden absence of the threat left a void. She had been so focused on the war that she hadn't thought about what peace would feel like. When she walked through her front door, the house was quiet. Lily was still at Jessica's, who had taken her for the day to shield her from the courthouse. The buttery yellow walls, the messy pile of Lily's toys in the corner, the faint scent of the wildflowers from the garden drifting through an open window, it was all still here. Her world had survived. She walked into Lily's room and her eyes fell on the small, well-loved teddy bear sitting on the pillow. Barnaby. His button eyes seemed to stare back at her, a silent, steadfast companion who had been at the center of it all. She picked him up, his fur worn smooth from years of hugs, and held him tight. This small, stuffed creature represented everything Mark and Chloe had never understood. He wasn't a toy, he was a confidant. He was the keeper of secrets, the brave knight in nighttime adventures, the silent witness to fevers and scraped knees and bedtime stories. He was a part of the intricate, invisible fabric of their life together. He was love in a language they would never be able to speak. Later that evening, when Jessica brought a sleepy Lily home, Sarah knelt and pulled her daughter into a fierce hug, burying her face in her hair that smelled of playground dust and bubble gum. "I love you so much, sweet pea," she murmured. "I love you too, Mommy," Lily said, hugging her back tightly. "Did you have a good day with the lawyers?" Sarah smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Yes, baby. It was a very good day." The immediate threat was gone, but Sarah knew the scars would remain. The betrayal ran deep, a poison that would take time to work its way out of her system. But as she tucked her daughter into bed, with Barnaby settled securely in the crook of her arm, she felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The storm had passed, the house was safe, the kingdom was secure, the dragon had been vanquished, not by a magic sword, but by the simple, unbreakable truth of a mother's love. The months that followed the court case were a study in quiet reclamation. The silence in the house was no longer fragile. It was strong, rooted. The fear that had been a constant low-level hum in the background of Sarah's life finally faded, replaced by the simple, steady rhythm of their days. As Eleanor had predicted, Mark disappeared. Faced with the humiliation of supervised visits and a court-ordered psychological evaluation, he chose to vanish instead. He sent a single terse email stating he was relocating for a new business opportunity and would be in touch at a later date. He paid his child support, a transaction as cold and impersonal as an ATM withdrawal, but he made no effort to see or speak to Lily. For a man who had claimed to be desperate for custody, his absence was the final, damning admission of his true motives. At first, Lily was confused. She would ask when Daddy was coming, her small face clouded with a hurt Sarah couldn't entirely shield her from. Sarah answered as honestly as she could, without bitterness. Daddy needed to go away for a while to sort some things out, sweet pea. But he loves you, and I love you, and we are going to be just fine. And over time, the questions grew less frequent. Their world, a universe of two, became enough. Sarah's redemption was not a dramatic, cinematic event. It was a slow, deliberate process of rebuilding, piece by piece. She enrolled in an online course for landscape design, turning her passion for her unruly garden into a potential career. The work was challenging and fulfilling, occupying her mind and her hands, and leaving little room for the ghosts of the past. She found joy in learning the Latin names of plants, in sketching out designs for vibrant, living spaces for others. It was the opposite of Mark's world of abstract numbers and financial deception. It was tangible, real, and beautiful. She reconnected with old friends, people she had drifted from during her marriage when Mark had subtly curated their social circle. She hosted dinner parties where the laughter was loud and genuine. She went on a weekend trip with Jessica, just the two of them, and they hiked and talked and drank cheap wine under the stars, and Sarah felt a lightness she hadn't realized she'd been missing for over a decade. One crisp autumn afternoon, about 6 months after the hearing, Sarah was at a local nursery, picking out bulbs for her spring garden, when she saw a familiar face. It was Chloe. She was dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. The expensive, polished armor was gone, and she looked younger, more vulnerable. Chloe saw her at the same time, and her first instinct was to turn and flee, but she stopped, took a breath, and walked hesitantly towards Sarah. "Hi," Chloe said, her voice quiet. "Hi, Chloe," Sarah replied, her own voice neutral, her heart giving a nervous flutter. I just wanted to say—" "I'm sorry," Chloe said, looking at the gravel path between them, "for everything. There's no excuse for what I did, for my part in it. I was stupid. I believed a fantasy and I let it make me into a person I'm not proud of." Sarah looked at the young woman before her. The anger and betrayal she had once felt had cooled into something closer to pity. She saw not a villain, but another person who had been caught in the vortex of Mark's ambition and deceit. "He lied to you too," Sarah said. It wasn't an absolution, just a statement of fact. A tear slipped down Chloe's cheek. He lied about everything. After the hearing, it all fell apart. The job, the apartment, the money. It was all a sham. I moved back home with my parents. I'm working as a waitress and taking classes at the community college, trying to figure out who I actually am, not who I was trying to be. She finally met Sarah's eyes. "I hope you and your daughter are happy. You deserve it." "We are," Sarah said softly, "and I hope you find what you're looking for, Chloe." As Chloe walked away, Sarah felt a final heavy knot in her chest loosen. Forgiveness wasn't about condoning what Chloe had done. It was about releasing herself from the burden of carrying that anger. It was about acknowledging the shared humanity, however flawed, in another person's journey. Sarah's own path was not about finding a new partner or erasing the past. It was about integrating it. The scars Mark had left were a part of her story, a testament to her resilience. They reminded her of the strength she didn't know she had, the ferocity of her own love for her child. That evening, as she and Lily planted the tulip and daffodil bulbs in the cool earth of their garden, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. They worked together, their hands covered in dirt, planning the colors that would erupt in the spring. "It's like we're burying little treasures, Mommy," Lily said, carefully placing a bulb in its hole. "It is, sweet pea," Sarah replied, smiling, "and we'll have to be patient and wait for them to grow. But when they do, it's going to be beautiful." She realized that's what she had been doing all along, planting bulbs of hope and strength in the dark, cold ground of her past, trusting that, with time and care, something beautiful would bloom. Her redemption wasn't a destination she had arrived at. It was the soil under her fingernails, the daughter laughing beside her, and the quiet, unshakable knowledge that she was, finally and completely, home. The courtroom is a battlefield where lives are dismantled and rebuilt, but sometimes the most powerful weapon is a simple truth. Sarah's fight wasn't just against a man, but against a web of lies designed to erase her. Her victory reminds us that true strength isn't about wealth or power, but about the fierce, unyielding love that can withstand any storm. It's a story of resilience, of a mother's bond that cannot be broken, and the quiet courage it takes to reclaim your own narrative. If Sarah's journey from betrayal to triumph moved you, please show your support by hitting the like button and sharing this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more powerful stories of justice, resilience, and the ultimate victory of the human spirit.